All right, so we were just getting started with our class proper, right? We've had our introductions. And the first thing I need to know is, do you have any prior preparation for the English 1123 syllabus?
सर प्रैक्टिसेबल और पेपर वन में जो न्यू एडिशन हुआ है नए सिलेबस का उसमें कुछ प्रॉब्लम है जैसे समरी वगैरह.
Right, so we've been joined by Shahiba, Mariam, and right, Muhammad Awais. Okay, so Shahiba, have you had any prior practice or preparation for the O-level English paper? It's okay if you want to, you don't want to unmute, you can reply in the chat. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a rundown of our English syllabus. Can all of you see my screen, the whiteboard? Yes, Haris? Okay. Okay, so the English language 1123 syllabus, which is the Cambridge O-level syllabus. And okay. All right, Shahiba, no issues. We'll be covering the syllabus and the technical aspects. We'll be talking about the required skills and doing some practice as well. Okay. One thing to know is the English syllabus, right, is not content intensive. Right? There's not a lot of content as far as the syllabus is concerned. What it focuses on is skill, right? So your language skills. And that is what we will talk about today, right? So this is just an introductory class. And so I'm not just going to jump in directly to doing comprehensions and all of that, right? I'm going to give you an overview of the syllabus and the required skills for this particular right, paper. Okay. So as far as the examination is concerned, you will have two papers. Right? Paper one is the reading paper. Right? It will have a comprehension section and a summary. Paper two is the writing paper. It will have a directed writing task and a composition. So they're basically just four tasks that encompass all that you need to do. Right now, there are obviously sub questions for each of these, especially directed writing, right? The different types of tasks that you would get, right? Composition. Just a minute, sorry. Okay. Each of these papers, right, are worth 50 marks and are 2 hours in duration, right? So that goes for both the reading and the writing papers. And each individual task, as you might guess, is worth 25 marks, right? So it's very evenly split. The total of these two is 100 marks. So very even. It used to be 110, right? But we're no longer concerned with that, obviously. Now, let's talk about these individually. Achha, just so, right? So the paper one is 2 hours. There's no obviously time limit as to how much time you spend on the comprehension versus the summary. That's really up to you, right? And how easily you're able to manage each one of those. So let's talk about the comprehension. Right, there are two questions. The first question has multiple sub questions, and it basically focuses on questions that will ask you about explicit and implicit meaning. Now we know a comprehension is where you get a text and you have certain questions based on that text, and you're supposed to respond. You're supposed to answer those questions by getting information from the text. Right. So the first question will test your understanding of explicit and implicit meaning. What that means is explicit means clearly stated, and implicit means you need to, as it's called, read between the lines. Right? So there are going to be hints in the text that will guide you towards what the answer is, but the answer will not be clearly given to you in those many words. The second question of the comprehension is what will test for implicit meaning. So we have that again. And writer's intent. So what does writer's intent mean? Writer's intent means that they will pick out parts of the text where the writer has used a particular word or phrased a sentence in a certain way, and they will ask you why the writer did that, why the writer chose to use one word over a similar word that could have been used in that place, or why the writer chose to phrase the sentence in a particular way, or what meaning does the writer want to convey to the reader, that is you, right? Uh, by writing this sentence or this part of the text in the way it has been written, right? And so, right, there's a particular way to attempt that, and we'll talk about it when we get there, right? And so these are the two types of questions with their sub questions, right? So this is the bigger heading that you'll be asked to attempt in the comprehension. The first question will be worth a total of 16 marks. The second question will be worth a total of 9 marks, and that brings you to 25. Okay. Any questions? All right, Shahiba, any questions? I'll take that as an all clear. Let me just move this stuff about. Okay. What we have next is the summary. Okay, the summary has two sub questions. One, part A is the actual summary writing task. Which is worth 20 marks. And you will be expected to write a summary that will be no more than 150 words, right? No more than 150. So the word limit over here is strict. You can't go over that. Okay. If you go over 150, you won't be penalized, but whatever's over the word limit will not be considered for grading either. In the breakup, we'll talk about how this is when we get there. Then the B part of the summary question is what's called a short response. It will be, in most cases, an interview-like question, and they'll ask you a question based on the text for the summary. So the text for the comprehension summary are they're different, right? So you will have an insert with the two texts, text A and text B. Text A will be for the comprehension, text B will be for the summary. Text A will, for the comprehension, will be more of a narrative type. It will be a story. Text B for the summary will be kind of informative, okay? Not exactly a story. And so for the short response, what they'll do is they'll present a scenario to you. You might be the person who is mentioned in the text for the summary, text B, and they'll say, well, people claim, or people believe, or what do you have to say about so and so? And what you need to do is you need to find evidence, which means points, from the text and give an answer, right? And they'll ask you to express your opinion. So when this express your opinion, doesn't mean that what you think personally as a candidate. It means when they give you the role that you are a person in the, mention the text, or maybe a person who is reviewing, or any other scenario, right? And so the opinion that you form will be based on the information that you have given in text B. So keep that in mind. Again, I'll go over that again when we attempt a summary, when we talk about it in detail. Right, and that is worth 5 marks, and so you again have a total of 25. That is your reading paper. Okay, coming to the writing paper, there's not much to talk about. You've got your directed writing. This is perhaps a bit tricky, the trickiest question perhaps in all of the syllabus. And what you'll be given is you'll be given a text or two, short texts, and they'll be on a certain topic, and then you'll be asked to write either a letter or an email or a report or an article or a speech based on the information given in the text. And they'll ask you to, if it's, they'll tell you whom you're writing to and what information from the text you need to focus on. So it's not that you take all the information. They'll give you a theme, and you'll need to collect points that relate to that theme. But it's not that straightforward, because there's something that you'll be asked to do for those points, and that is analyze and evaluate, right? And so what that basically means is that the points you pick out, you need to gauge how strong those points are, whether they're worth mentioning in the argument. They are, but right, how much credit you want to give to those points. And then again, right, so you want to go further and understand what the writer or what the person in the text is trying to say beyond the given point. Right? And again, we'll do that when we practice something from the paper. Acha. One thing I need to mention that for the questions that are implicit, for the summary task and for the directed writing, right? You need to respond in your own words. So although, right, and this is where students struggle, although the text is given to you, got the information, but you will need to rephrase, and that is one of the skills, right, among the other, all the other skills that we need to work on, right? And obviously that comes through practice. Okay, right, and this, right, so there are no subparts for this one. The directed writing task is for a total of 25 marks. Lastly, we have the composition, where you will have to write you will have to write either a descriptive piece, descriptive writing, or a narrative, right? You'll be given options, so you'll have 2 topics for each. So in total, you'll have 4, and you'll need to write on any one. So that's convenient. And there's obviously right, the whole thing is worth 25 marks. There's a word limit, so 350 to 450 words is the word limit for your composition. There's also a word limit for directed writing, which is 250 to 350. The word limit here is not as strict. So, right, again, we'll talk about that when we come to that one. Personally, Haris, you personally always choose narrative. Well, yes, students do find narratives easier, but writing a good, proper, well-structured narrative is actually a bit more demanding than the kind of narrative students normally write down. Okay, and we'll talk about that as well. Now, there are certain assessment objectives. So I want to put that on screen as well. Okay. Right. Can you see the PDF on your screen? Okay. So this is the syllabus. You can get this from the Cambridge website. You can just search for English 1123 syllabus, right? And you'll be able to get it. And these are, right, so I've mentioned the explicit meaning when for your reading paper and for any task that involves reading. So these are the kind of things that may be tested. It varies from question to question. And so there's explicit meaning, there's implicit meaning, which I talked about. There's the evaluation, analysis and evaluation, which I talked about. There's writer's meaning and effect. Right, so I mentioned all of these. And there's selection and use of information for specific purposes. Okay, so that is again answering the question and writing what is required, not going on right off on a tangent, not writing stories or being putting in too much detail or not being specific. Right, remember that Cambridge requires specific answers. As for the writing tasks, right, so you'll be assessed on whether you can articulate experience and express what is thought. So right, if it's for a narrative, then right, or a descriptive perhaps, whichever one you choose. So whether you can put into words what you're thinking, what you've been asked to put into words, whether you can properly organize and structure your ideas, right? So the organization, the sentence structure, right? It mentioned the next one, range of vocabulary and sentence structure appropriate to context. So the way you write it, the choice of your words, the kind of sentences you write, the way you organize it, okay, all of that, and obviously spelling, grammar, and punctuation. So in these exams, there is no separate grammar portion. Your grammar is tested within the task that is given to you. Okay. So these are the objectives that will be assessed. Again, not all of them are assessed at the same time, right? If you just scroll through, you can see, for example, that in the comprehension, right, the first question that I mentioned, as I told you, it tests your explicit meaning and implicit meaning understanding. The second one, sorry, it tests your understanding of how writers achieve effect. And right, and so for the summary, they mention the reading and the writing assessments that will be tested for parts A and part B, and similarly for the writing paper. Okay, now we're about more than halfway through. Can you see the whiteboard again? Just to make sure. Okay. Now let's talk about the language skills that are required. And let's kind of generally break these up into reading skills and writing skills. So let's talk about reading skills first. And right, apart from practicing the questions and getting familiar with the kind of questions that will be asked and how to approach them based on the assessment objectives that are mentioned in the syllabus. And again, you can get the syllabus from the website. You should get the syllabus from the website, and you should, go through it thoroughly. So based on the kind of questions we get, based on how to answer them and the assessment objectives, obviously, what you need to know for reading are the skills of skimming. I'm just listing them down right now because going into detail for each one, we don't have enough time for that. So I'm just going to list them right now. So we've got skimming, scanning, so that's an in, and intensive reading. You may be familiar with some or many of these, and if not, right, we'll talk about them in a later class. Then obviously, as also mentioned in the assessment objective, identifying relevant points, and with that, being able to separate a main idea or a main point from its supporting details. What else do we need to know for reading? We need to be able to understand context. And there's obviously vocabulary. And with that, being able to understand contextual meaning for the words used in the text. Okay. What else do we have, right? For the questions that require you to deal with writer's meaning and effect. So how writers convey meaning and right achieve effect or writer's intent. What you need to know is you need to develop a skill of reading between the lines. And that is what I mentioned as going beyond what the text has given you. So there'll be hints, right? There's implicit meaning, there's implied meaning, there's intended meaning, but it's not something that is given to you clearly. It's only pointing, it's only hinting towards it. And so what you need to do is understand those, catch on to those hints, and then go beyond. Okay. Also, well, as I just mentioned, right, going beyond. And for that, you need to be imaginative. And also, as we'll see, you need to be exaggerative. Okay. Okay. So those are for the reading skills. Now let's talk about the required writing skills. Any questions so far about the reading skills? I know I didn't go into detail for any of those. I just listed them down. Okay. So one thing for writing, and right, so the writing skill is obviously for the writing paper, for the directed writing task and the composition, but also for the summary, because right, even though it's in the reading paper, you will be required to write a summary of 150 words. And so this applies to a certain extent to the writing paper, the summary question as well. Okay. Welcome to the class, Fahim. We're just on the last leg. Okay. And so the skills required, first of all, is that you need to know the writing process. And this is something, obviously, I'll go over it. But if you want, you can just Google steps of the writing process and you'll get your results. And it's not something that I've come up with. It is something that anyone who is writing a piece, whether for exam prep or formally in like for their job or anywhere, right? This is a process you would want to go through to polish your writing before handing it in if a submission is required. And along with that, right? So the writing process, and this is part of it, but I just want to highlight it: planning. So planning is part of the writing process, but I want to highlight that, so that's why I'm writing it separately. And again, this is right. You need to learn to critically review your own work. Because when we do something, whether it's an action or something we've said, or obviously our writing, it's easier for us to pick out mistakes in something that another person has done, and not so much when we are taking a look at our own work, right? So we need to learn, we need to develop the skill of being critical with our own work. And that will help us improve our writing, because no one's writing is perfect. So what you write the first time and you want to go back, take a look, and so that's what the writing process entails. Then, right, you obviously need grammar skills, right? And lots of them. And I've made this list based on the kind of mistakes students, I mean, the Cambridge requirement, but also the areas where students generally make mistakes. Right. So what are we looking at? Well, first and foremost, we are obviously looking at tenses. Know your tenses, get your tenses right. Then we are looking at what is called subject verb agreement. A very simple grammatical concept, but a very important one. Okay. Next up is sentence types. Again, very simple. Then we have sentence structure, right? And this is very important, right? It is specifically mentioned in the syllabus. So this is something that the examiners will focus on, and this is something that will affect the grading of your writing. And that is sentence structure. This is obviously very important. And then we have sentence building. So that goes along with, the tenses and the subject. So, right, this is a skill we want to develop so that when we are preparing for the exams, or when we're already preparing, going in for the exam, we know how to construct a lengthier sentence and know when to use a shorter sentence, when to go in for a longer one. Right? So sentence building. Uh, and then finally, right, we've got punctuation. And let me put this here. Paragraphing. Paragraphing is something students struggle with, right? They don't know when to split the paragraph, or even that they need to, paragraph their writing. Okay, our synonyms and antonyms are more to do with vocabulary, but yes, obviously, right? And so those are important. Those will be important for your comprehension questions and in your writing overall. Okay, another skill is being able to create flow in your writing, right? So if you read any good written piece, it will flow naturally. It will seem very realistic and right, as I said, the term natural. It won't seem robotic. It won't seem stuck. It won't seem difficult. And so you want to create flow. Uh, then obviously the specific features of whatever it is that you're writing. So whether it's directed writing or composition, whether it's a letter or report, or whether it's an narrative or descriptor. So each one of those has certain specific features which we'll go into when we talk about those. We need to know about formal and informal language, right? And I need to wrap this up quickly. We have just about 2 minutes left. Okay. Talking specifically about narrative and descriptive writing. So the structure of a narrative, and that's where Haris, you mentioned that you prefer writing narratives. So the structure and elements of narrative writing. And Finally, right, the descriptive approach. So if anyone, and right, even if you are inclined towards a narrative, we will touch on this topic, right? So how to deal with a descriptive writing task. And what this means is when we're talking about description, we are looking for details, right? And those details will be relating to the five senses along with our feelings and emotions, right? Again, depending on the question, exactly depending on the question, but generally speaking, that's what we'll be doing. So these are all the skills, and based on that, right, you would guess that there would be a few classes where we will be dealing with theory. Okay, the meeting's about to end in a few seconds. Are there any questions? All right, so right, all's good. And I'll see you guys next class then, inshallah. All right. All right, you can leave if you want. The meeting is just about to end on its own. Fi amanillah. Thank you for attending.